Hello, everybody. I'm Estela Cuesta. I'm a market analyst and actually leading the team of experts on the global processed food commodities markets. And I'm joined today by Max Rin, our market analyst within S&P Global Commodity Insights, who focuses on meat and livestock markets. Hello, Max.
Hello, Estela.
So, Max, today we'll be discussing how markets are currently being affected by the outbreaks of animal diseases such as avian flu, foot and mouth disease, and African swine fever. You've been mentioning in your reports that in some cases these outbreaks are causing prices to rise, while in others they are pushing prices in the opposite direction. Let's go one by one, and let's start with the avian flu. So, Max, at the moment, what are the developments for this disease, and actually, what is the impact on the market?
Okay, well, avian flu has been an issue for several years, but since the beginning of this year, there's been quite dramatic impacts in the US, particularly for egg markets. There's been about 50 million birds lost since December, slightly more than that, and more than 80% of those are layer hens. So the biggest impact has been on egg markets in the US. That's been quite well publicized. But the problem really is that the industry factors in these outbreaks because they've been recurrent for the past few years, but it's harder to adjust production when the losses suddenly jump. That's what's happened in the last 3 months. So say last year at this time, the industry was losing about 2 million birds a month to avian flu. And since December, that's jumped to about 20 million birds a month. Now, it's much harder then for the industry to adjust production. It takes a few months to get enough replacement birds to replace those ones that have been lost. And that's why we've seen this massive jump in egg prices, which we've seen in the US over the past 2 or 3 months. Already been rising before then, but it really has taken off, so that New York and Midwest egg prices are now pushing $8 a dozen, compared with about $3 last year. So yeah, that's the situation in the US. They have the government's announced a new plan to try and tackle it, which includes about $1 billion in spending on a mixture of biosecurity efforts, improving biosecurity to try and keep the disease out of production facilities, and also vaccine research and support for farmers. But when we look at how successful that is going to be, we've got to be quite careful, because avian flu outbreaks tend to go down in the summer. So naturally, we're going to see an improvement of the situation probably over the next 2 or 3 months. That could then be hailed by politicians as a success for their plans. But when we're assessing it, we really need to look at the situation next winter and see whether it's improving on this winter. So that's pretty much the situation in the US at the moment. If we're looking at the situation in Europe, in the past, it's been similar to the US. There was in 2020 to 22, they were both losing similar numbers of birds. In Europe this time, in this season, the situation's a bit more mixed. So we've lost about 2.7 million birds in Poland. When I say lost, that includes the ones that are infected and also the ones that are destroyed, culled on affected farms, because you have to cull all the birds on an affected farm. So 2.7 million in Poland since the start of this year, and about 2 million in the UK. And Hungary's been quite badly affected. But then other areas like other countries like France, which was worst hit in the previous outbreak, lost 19 million birds between 2020 and 22. Situation there is much better. Very few outbreaks, and also the Netherlands much better than previous seasons, and Spain has reported no outbreaks recently. So quite a mixed picture in Europe, and overall impacts on markets are much less dramatic than in the US. So production is not significantly down for either broilers or eggs. In fact, it's risen. So for broilers, and prices are only about 7% higher than they were at this time last year for both of those products. So yeah, not quite so bad in Europe. In Australia, it's coming back a little bit, and so it's having some impact on egg markets there, but no, again, nowhere near as bad as in the US.
Right. Okay. So yeah, of course, we are keeping the focus on the US for avian flu, and obviously in Europe as well, because even though now the situation is quiet, it could change quickly.
Could change, and it's also quite interesting that in India, the impacts of avian flu have been completely the opposite. There's been recent outbreaks there, and because people there in some regions are fearful of eating eggs and chicken when an avian flu outbreak occurs because of perceptions that it might be harmful, prices have actually come down rather than risen in some areas where avian flu outbreaks have happened there. So yeah, that's shows how things can vary in different parts of the world.
Okay, now let's move to the second disease that is affecting the meat and livestock world, which is the foot and mouth disease. Obviously, the focus here is mainly Europe, and actually Germany. Max, tell us a bit more about it. What is the current situation, please?
Well, there was an outbreak at the start of the year on about January the 10th, and it was quite a shock because there hadn't been any outbreaks in Germany for nearly 40 years. And although it only hit one farm, it caused the UK and South Korea and a couple of other markets to close their doors to German pork and beef. So that immediately put downward pressure on prices because that meat then had to find another outlet and was redirected to markets within the EU where it could still be sold. So again, that shows how impacts can move in the opposite direction to the US when a disease outbreak occurs. And in this case, it kind of shows that when trade restrictions are put in place, that's the main problem rather than the loss of animals because no further outbreaks have been reported. Just seeing we're a bit pushed for time, so I'll just summarize the situation there. It's actually because no further outbreaks have been reported, prices have now started to stabilize, and people in Germany are increasingly hopeful that it'll prove to be an isolated case, which would pretty much see markets return to normal. And hopefully those countries which closed their doors to German pork and beef would then feel able to reopen. But the UK is very wary of doing that because of the fact it lost so many millions of animals to FMD at the start of in about 2001.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Is there any kind of subsidy for those affected?
The German farmers are Germany is requesting support from the European Commission. The farmers do get subsidies, but they do get support to help them through disease outbreaks. But Germany is asking for support from the European Commission to help them make sure that farmers are fully compensated for their losses.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks, Max. Let's quickly move to the last one, African swine fever. I mean, we could be talking about animal diseases for at least an hour, but what is the quickest update you can give us regarding the situation in Europe and Asia at the moment, Max?
Just very quickly to summarize, the situation in Europe has not got significantly worse over the past year. The main concern is the westerly spread in Germany. It's not causing significant losses to pigs. Only a few farms have been affected, mostly in wild boar, but there is a lot of worry over the fact that wild boar have been found closer and closer to Germany's westerly neighbours, so it could potentially cause problems in France where it hasn't reached yet. So that's the main worry there. In terms of production losses, as I say, that very, very small in terms of the impact on German production, and German production actually increased last year for the first time in several years. Mm-hmm. The situation in Asia is mixed again. China's always hard to assess because it doesn't fully update the World Health Organization for Animal Health on its cases, but the situation in the Philippines is still quite bad, and that's leaving them still very reliant on imports of pork to make up for the amount of pigs they've lost to African swine fever. Yeah, so that's the main developments in terms of African swine fever.
Okay, thank you, Max. So of course, thanks for your time and your knowledge. Of course, the situation can change from on a monthly basis very quickly and very radically. So because of that, we provide monthly updates on these diseases, and yeah, we keep you updated. So thanks everyone for listening, and thanks again, Max, for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.